June 25th, 1944, Saipan. Heat presses on the canvas like a hand. Coral grit skitters under boot heels as a GMC CCKW coughs downshift outside the aid tent. Lieutenant Mary Ellen Carter, Army Nurse Corps, cleans a jagged forearm wound with steely patience that would have been practiced 100 times in training. "This will sting," she says, not a threat, a promise of order. The prisoner blinks. Corporal Shigeru Nakamura expected the knife. He gets a tin mug of coffee and a blanket that smells of carbolic and damp canvas. The ward runs like a factory line. Triage, sulfa, morphine syringe, clean gauze, record. Saipan's battle is still roaring beyond the reef. Organized resistance will end July 9th, but inside the tent, the clock already favors the United States. T/3 Kenji Hayakawa, Military Intelligence Service, waits at the periphery and would likely wait longer, letting mercy do the first interrogation. Nakamura's lips touch the mug. He tastes heat, metal, a hint of chocolate someone might have stirred into the pot because they could. He hears inventory language more than battlefield slang. Dressings on hand, litters available, evacuation set to the hospital ship if vitals hold. Names surface from a fog of doctrine. 31st Army, 43rd Division, Admiral Nagumo ashore and gone. He feels the bandage tighten, hears Carter's steady breath. If this is a trap, it is built from cleanliness and competence. By the entrance, an M1 Garand rests against a crate, 8-round en bloc clipped home. At the post outside, a guard shifts the light M1 carbine on his shoulder. Outside, the truck grumbles, and a clerk notes his pulse with tidy block letters. Somewhere, unseen, America is already building the second cup of coffee and the 1,000th bandage. The sound is only engines and paper, but it feels like a verdict. Night takes the island in slow breaths. The tent warms with lantern light, and a Red Cross flag knocks softly against the pole. Carter checks a junior nurse's sterile field, correcting by habit more than rebuke. Lawful care is non-negotiable, she would say, because it is who we are and because it works. Nakamura studies the ritual. Instruments laid out, syrettes counted, charts squared to the clipboard's edge. The sound is cloth, glass, pencil, no menace, only metronome. Hayakawa steps close enough to be heard without being feared. In practiced Japanese, he asks about water, rations, the last time Nakamura saw his company commander. Courtesies frame each question. He does not press for names he knows will come later. Intelligence would typically move along a chain from tent to JICPOA, but tonight it begins with a nod. Outside, a reefer truck hisses. Ice chips clink into canteens. The impossibility of cold water in war feels like a rumor that became policy. Facts anchor the moment even as memory drifts. Saipan's 31st Army under Obata, 43rd Division under Saito. Naval troops that once took orders from Nagumo, now broken and scattered. The evacuation chain is rehearsed aloud for the new nurse. Aid station to surgical tent to hospital ship if indicators hold. By the entrance, an orderly wipes a Garand sling where salt has freckled the leather. At the perimeter, a carbine's bolt snaps home with a tidy domestic sound. Nakamura answers a small question before remembering why he should not. He expects the punishment that never arrives. Instead, a second cup of water appears, and the nurse says please in a voice that makes space around the word. Hayakawa closes his notebook and thanks him, in Japanese, because courtesy, like logistics, travels farther than force. Winter 1944-45, Camp McCoy, Wisconsin. Steam rattles a potbelly stove while snow needles the window screen. Sergeant Ruth Abrams, Women's Army Corps, stamps a form, slides it to the right, and beckons the next man forward. "Please sign here," she would say, polite the way a well-oiled bolt is polite. A rail convoy exhales brake dust. Guarded POWs step down into floodlit geometry. Towers, wire, numbered streets, barracks warmed by coal the way schedules are warmed by discipline. A GMC deuce and a half idles, canvas flapping like a flag in the cold. Nakamura learns the cadence of America in winter. He is issued camp script for labor and discovers he can buy soap at a canteen window where postcards and chocolate sit behind wire. He notes the guard's parka, the smell of wool and oil, the way the rifle's sling creaks when leather freezes. An escape siren would likely bring searchlights, dogs, and carbines to bear in minutes. Courtesy has teeth. The numbers arrive like weather fronts, too large to stop. Roughly 2,700 Japanese prisoners will rotate through this post at peak. Beyond the fence, facts that seem impossible become ordinary. About 5.4 million M1 Garand rifles and more than 6 million M1 carbines produced. Over 500,000 GMC CCKW trucks built, roughly 2,710 Liberty ships launched, 3 ships every 2 days at wartime peak. A single depot yard could outshine a field army's lifetime of motor transport. Abrams balances head counts and meal rolls with the quiet authority of a foreman in a nation-sized shop. She thanks each man without ceremony. Nakamura signs, ink freezing in the nib, and pockets his script like contraband from another planet. Outside, the truck backfires, and the cold air rings. Somewhere past the wire, a loudspeaker tests a surrender script that began, weeks ago, with a nurse saying, "Please." June throws a hard, clean light on crates that smell of burlap and salt. A stevedore's hook bites canvas, and a pallet of coffee swings from hold to pier. Somewhere up the chain, a clerk stamped a requisition and the ocean agreed to carry kindness as cargo. Liberty ships shouldered the load, standard hulls by the thousands, 3 launched about every 2 days at the wartime peak. And a quartermaster lieutenant would have called it throughput, not miracle. The cans move from pier to depot to convoy, manifests typed, seals inspected, a line of GMC CCKW, 2.5 tons, coughing into gear, like a chorus clearing its throat. Across water and reef, the Saipan aid tent receives its allotment. Here, inventory turns to ritual, morphine syrettes counted, sulfatins stacked, gauze rolls banded by size. The same hand that checks a ledger flicks an unblocked clip into an M1 Garand with the unthinking grace of repetition. A reefer unit rattles behind the berm, cooling water that will make the next cup less metallic. The nurse's wristwatch keeps a production schedule more than a pulse, dressings at 0400, vitals at 0600, evacuation if indicators hold. Corporal Nakamura lifts the tin mug and tastes heat, metal, and a whisper of sweetness someone likely stirred in because they could. T/3 Hayakawa watches the cup travel from hand to mouth and sees the report he will file before midnight. Humane treatment observed, prisoner cooperative, notes on company strength and last known ammunition state. Courtesy, here, is inventory plus intent, the soft edge of a very hard machine. Outside, the 2.5 lugs another crate forward. Engines thrum, papers rustle, a pen scratches. The small pleasure in a prisoner's hands is the end of a continent-wide sentence that began with a purchase order and ends with the word please. Night in the lava tube smelled of mildew, oil, and old rice. Before capture, Nakamura would have rolled an Arisaka bolt in the dark to feel its grudging travel, counted cartridges by touch, and halved a rice ball again. Orders were simple: hold, then die. The arithmetic was scarcity. One bandage becomes a rag, becomes a tourniquet. A friend becomes a stretcher, becomes a silence. Propaganda promised American cruelty. The creed promised no surrender. But the island had its own math. Saipan's 31st Army bled itself down to shadows. The 43rd Division's command voices thinned and went out. In the caves, rumor walked faster than water. Men said the enemy had ice in their canteens. In the tent, the logic flipped. A nurse would have said please and meant it. A carbine bolt snapped home with domestic neatness, not theater. The cup tasted clean. Hayakawa's questions came wrapped in honorifics, and for the first time since enlistment, Nakamura felt addressed, not commanded. He answered a small thing, then another. He noticed waste. if that is what you call a pot poured out to clean a ladle, a cigarette stub ground into coral, a pile of unused dressings kept ready for the next hour. Waste means reserve. Reserve means tomorrow. The numbers he learns later frame the revelation. Of more than 30,000 defenders on Saipan, only around 1,700 to 1,800 were taken alive. Most of his world chose death. That rarity makes each survivor a carrier of truth. His truth is simple and disobedient. The enemy's women spoke without hatred. The next night he sleeps through to sick call. In the morning, when the coffee arrives again, he realizes he has begun to expect it. An expectation is the first mercy he allows himself. Black sand hisses under boots as litters move toward the beach. Time shifts forward to Iwo Jima, February to March 1945, where roughly 21,000 defenders met the Marines in tunnels and ash. The ratios are savage. Only about 216 Japanese prisoners are taken alive during the battle, roughly 100. To one dying rather than surrendering, and each becomes a rare instrument. A Navy nurse aboard a hospital ship would have repeated Carter's cadence: clean, swab, dress, reassure. Plasma bottles sway with the ship's roll. An X-ray clacks into its sleeve. A corpsman murmurs easy now, as if speaking to a brother. Up the chain, the military intelligence service moves at steam speed. An interpreter notes cave layouts, unit designations, last known ammunition states. A typist turns breath into lines, and a signalman sends them shoreward to V Amphibious Corps G2 and on to JICPOA. The courtesy that steadied a hand in the ward steadies information in transit. Meanwhile, the machine that made it possible does not slacken. Liberty ships continue their march, thousands built, 3 every 2 days at peak, and the trucks keep arriving with dressings and rations until need itself runs out of places to hide. On deck, the nurse's cap is salt stiff, the wind medicinal. She says this will sting, and it does, but it also saves. The prisoner hears pleas and watches a guard cradle his carbine like a tool, not a threat. He answers a question because the future has widened by an inch. Far away, ledgers will add what cannot be believed: 6,821 Americans killed and 19,217 wounded here. Nearly all the enemy dead. 216 living mouths that carry proof ashore that mercy is credible. The screws bite, and the island recedes with the old arithmetic cracking behind it. The platform smells of creosote and burnt coffee. A Red Cross woman steadies a thermos with one hand and the wind-tugged brim of her hat with the other. "Watch your step," she calls, not to the guards, not to the civilians leaning at the fence, but to the line of prisoners filing toward the boxcars under a sky the color of zinc. Sergeant Ruth Abrams signs the movement order with a blunt pencil and would have checked the car numbers twice. The schedule is a living thing here, fed by coal and discipline. The guards carry M1 carbines slung low, muzzles to gravel, safeties on. Between whistles and wheel clatter, Nakamura hears a language of decency he does not know how to translate. "Please, thank you. Right this way." He studies the canteen table, metal urn, paper cups folded tight as shells, and wonders what it means that people with so much can be this calm. Abrams keeps the line moving, her tone as firm as the platform timbers. She narrates the next steps the way Carter narrated dressings. Roll call at the siding, ration issue by roster, water cans topped, no exceptions. Rumor has reached even this town that POWs are paid in scrip and can buy soap. The thought hangs in the air like breath in winter. A brakeman tips his cap to the canteen woman. The gesture lands with the soft finality of a stamp on paper. Nakamura looks back once and sees no hatred, only competence. The conductor waves a green flag, the couplers bang, and the convoy gathers itself. The Red Cross woman lifts the thermos in a small salute. The cars slide past her hand, and for a heartbeat, he imagines the coffee carried all the way to the next town, the next camp, the next mercy. The canteen window slides open with a wooden sigh. Shelves hold soap, postcards, pencils, a few chocolate bars rationed by rules posted in clipped English and patient Japanese. Nakamura's script is stiff from the cold. He has earned it stacking wood on a detail that would have cycled every hour. Work, warm up, work, because frostbite wastes men in ways war does not intend. He chooses the soap. The bar's clean, faint smell is an argument he cannot refute. Abrams signs for deliveries in a cramped office that breathes coal dust and dignity. Inventory would have been counted like prayer: tobacco by carton, soap by bar, stationery by packet, every item matched to a ledger line that will square under the dim bulb by lights out. A siren splits the afternoon, an escape attempt, or just a drill. And the perimeter proves that courtesy is not confusion. Searchlights tilt, dog teams lope, posts report by the book, tower 1 up, tower 2 up. A corporal at the clearing barrel locks open the bolt on an M1 Garand, brass bright as a medal against the snow. The commotion dies as quickly as it rose. Orders restore the tempo. A pot clatters back onto a stove. Nakamura writes his mother's address on a postcard he may never send and pockets it anyway, a square of foreign hope. In the barracks, radiators hiss. A guard knocks snow from his boots and lays a carbine on the rack without ceremony. Somewhere beyond the wire, trains lift into the cold, with the assurance of a nation that knows where everything is and why. Lights dim, and the camp returns to its ordinary. When the canteen window slides shut, it sounds like a book closing. This chapter done, the next already printed by schedules and steel. October 1945 turns the Central Valley into a brass bowl of heat. GMCCCKWS nose between citrus rows, canvas flaps snapping, jerry cans clunking against side rails. Mrs. Elsa Lindstrom rides the flatbed like a quartermaster with dirt under her nails. "Make sure they get water. It's hot," she tells the sergeant, and if the line surprises him, he doesn't show it. He checks the watch bill, then the canteens. Nakamura steps down into dust that tastes like pennies and watches America do peace, the way it did war, by schedule. Crates are stamped, field scales tick, a clipboard rides the tailgate like a flag. The guards carry carbines at ease, muzzles down. The unfussed competence is its own message. He remembers caves that smelled of mildew and fear, and now smells oranges and gasoline. The difference feels like heresy. A teenage girl at the fence stares, then shrugs, then passes a jar of water to a GI who passes it to a prisoner without theater. It is not friendship, it is procedure. And procedure here is mercy with a stopwatch. The numbers, when they surface, sound invented. More than 500,000 CCKW trucks built. Roughly 2,710 Liberty ships launched, at peak, 3 in 2 days. So many hulls that logistics became a promise kept instead of a wish. Millions of M1s and carbines, enough that even the rear areas carry modern firepower and never run short. One afternoon's truck park would have dwarfed the motor pool Nakamura saw in his entire war. Against that arithmetic, a cup of clean water in a field is not a miracle, it is an output. He drinks, tastes metal, dust, and the rind of an orange carried in a GY's pocket. The convoy back to the siding idles, engines low, as if the war itself were waiting to be loaded out and sent home. The map room smells of paste, cordite memories, and coffee cooling on a radiator. Pins march across the Central Pacific like a new constellation, while a clerk's pencil whispers totals no one believes at first hearing. The arithmetic is unemotional. Saipan cost roughly 3,100 Americans killed and 13,000 wounded. Japanese dead approached 25,000, with about 1,700 to 1,800 taken alive. Iwo Jima was redder still, 6,821 Americans killed and 19,217 wounded. Nearly all the defenders dead, only 216 prisoners. The numbers bruise, and then they teach. Humane treatment for the few mattered to the many because those few carried proof into caves the loudspeakers could not reach. The curtain lifts further when the supply ledgers are read aloud. About 5.4 million M1 Garand rifles, more than 6 million M1 carbines, over 500,000 GMC CCKW trucks, and roughly 2,710 Liberty ships. At peak, 3 hulls every 2 days. Explain how a nurse's second cup of coffee could be policy instead of luck. Waste, the enemy called it. Reserve, the quartermaster corrected. Reserve means tomorrow, and tomorrow wins wars. A lieutenant traces a string from depot to airfield to beach, and the line hums with reliable miracles. Cold water on a hot island, gauze that never runs out, morphine when it is needed and not when it is not. Outside, snow starts in slow coins against the window. Inside, the clerk adds a column and stops, not because the answer is wrong, but because it is vast. Then she writes it anyway, because writing it makes it real. The nation that can itemize its kindness can weaponize it. The final pin slides home, and a soft laugh goes around the table. Astonishment, not glee, at what free hands can build when they count. A loudspeaker truck noses up to a jungle fringe on an island whose name the war will forget. The driver idles low, and the amplifier breathes a promise into caves. You will live, you will eat, you will be treated. It is not propaganda if it is true. Credibility arrives on the backs of the 216 from Iwo and the few hundred more from Saipan. Each story spread by leaflet and rumor. A nurse said, "Please." A clerk said, "Thank you." The water was cold. In the tent, T/3 Hayakawa rewrites phrases until they fit the grammar of dignity. In the ops shack, an officer tapes interrogation notes, cave layout, last ammunition reports, officer names, to a wall and draws lines that turn into orders by morning. On the hospital ship, a Navy nurse checks a dressing and teaches a corpsman to say, "This will sting," in Japanese. The chain is unbroken. Mercy to speech, to paper, to action. Meanwhile, the machine that underwrites the tone keeps rumbling. Liberty ships push schedules like clock hands. CCKWS stack in motor pools. M1s are cleaned by men who learn to do it blindfolded because the weapon and the soldier should think at the same speed. The doctrine is simple enough to write on the edge of a field card. Lawful restraint preserves intelligence. Intelligence saves American lives. Beyond the waterline, plans for occupation hospitals and flower shipments are drafted with the same neat block letters as casualty returns. The future is not an abstraction, it is on a manifest. The loudspeaker clicks off. For a breath, the jungle is only wind and birds. Then a white cloth appears at a cave mouth, small as a mercy in air that has carried too much shouting. A sergeant nods once, as if recognizing a vow kept. Steam rises from 2 worlds at once. A truck tailgate thunders down in a Midwestern depot, exhaling crates and paperwork. A teacup trembles on a lacquered table in a ruined home, where Nakamura sits across from his mother with a blank American postcard between them. He cannot write the word that mattered most because it was too ordinary to survive translation. Please. Demobilization rolls out like a tide with a timetable. Convoys to ports, hulls to peacetime cargoes, factories retooled while the GI Bill drafts a different kind of order of battle. The ledgers close on numbers that still sound invented. Roughly 2,710 Liberty ships launched in 4 years. Over 500,000 deuce-and-a-halves, millions of M1s and carbines. So much steel that even rear area guards never lacked a modern rifle. So much lift that coffee could cross an ocean on schedule. One day's output at the peak could outfit more men than some enemies armed in a month, and the difference was not merely metal, but morale, the confidence to waste a minute on kindness, because tomorrow's trucks were already warming up. Abrams turns in her stamp and walks past a motor pool where rows of CCKWs look like punctuation waiting for a final sentence. Carter removes her cap and smooths the crease where service has taught fabric to remember. Mrs. Lindstrom tallies a ledger whose last generous entry was water for men who had tried to kill sons like hers. Hayakawa files one last report and writes only this line in the margin: "We kept our word." Nakamura's mother pours tea. He lifts the cup with a hand that healed because an enemy had enough of everything to be gentle. Outside, winter light balances on snow, on steam, on steel cooling into peace.